Mythology has always fascinated people, from the ancient Greeks to the Egyptians. The Pokemon universe is no exception. There's such a heavy set of lore hidden throughout the games that we've compiled the 10 most interesting myths in the Pokemon lore. The first in-game Pokemon myth we're going to look at is the legend of the Towers of ECRUTEAK from Pokemon Gold, Silver and Crystal. The legend is a simple one. 2 towers, 2 Pokemon, but then one burned down. Both Pokemon flew away, never to return. Approximately 700 years before the events of Pokemon Gold and Silver, 2 towers were built in ECRUTEAK City. The Western Tower was known as the Brass Tower, where the legendary Pokemon Lugia came to rest, and the Eastern Tower was the Tin Tower, where Lugia's counterpart Ho-Oh came to rest. Centuries later, a lightning bolt struck the Brass Tower and Lugia fled. The tower burned to the ground and 3 Pokemon died in the fire. However, Ho-Oh revived them and they became Raikou, who represents the lightning bolt that struck the tower, Entei, the fire that burned the tower, and Suicune, the water that extinguished the fire. Ho-Oh then left ECRUTEAK, but the legend claims he will return for a pure-hearted Pokemon trainer. Interestingly, the Tin Tower was renamed the Bell Tower in the Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. While some fans theorized the name change was because of the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers, there is a much more likely explanation. The Japanese name can be translated as either Tin Tower or Bell Tower. Since Pokemon Crystal and the anime made a clear connection between the tower and bells, Bell Tower is a more fitting translation. The Japanese name for the Brass Tower can also be translated to refer to a type of bell. However, it's called the Burn Tower in every game but Crystal, so it never received a name change. Pokemon Diamond, Pearl and Platinum might have more myths than any other generation of Pokemon games. And while many merely explain the origins of legendary Pokemon, a few folktales found at the Canalave Library reveal bizarre pieces of Pokemon history. The first one states, "Pick clean the bones of Pokemon caught in the sea or stream, thank them for the meals they provide, and pick their bones clean. When the bones are as clean as can be, set them free in the water from which they came. The Pokemon will return, fully fleshed, and it begins anew." So, if you ever wondered whether humans eat Pokemon, the answer is yes. Not only that, but these Pokemon return to life if you put their bones in the water, and then you can eat them again? Creepy. Pokemon being eaten and revived in a continual process is by far the most normal of the 3 stories. The second one states, "There lived a Pokemon in a forest. In the forest, the Pokemon shed its hide to sleep as a human. Awakened, the human dons the Pokemon hide to roam villages." Does this literally mean a Pokemon turned into a human, only to take on the appearance of a Pokemon again to visit human villages in disguise? Is this a metaphor for how humanity evolved in the Pokemon world? Or should we be worried that some of the Pokemon in towns are humans wearing Pokemon hides? And that's still not the end of the Sinnoh folk story weirdness. The third folktale states, "There once were Pokemon that became very close to humans. There once were humans and Pokemon that ate together at the same table. It was a time when there existed no difference to distinguish the two." At first glance, this is the most normal of all the Pokemon myths and folktales. Humans and Pokemon were close. That sounds like what most people in the Pokemon world want to achieve. But wait, they ate together at the same table? And they were indistinguishable from each other? This odd statement about there being no differences between humans and Pokemon again implies that either Pokemon became human or vice versa. But the English localization spared us an even weirder twist. The literal translation of the Japanese text says these humans and Pokemon married each other. Human-Pokemon marriage. Who says Pokemon is a simple story? Pokemon Gold, Silver and Crystal's ruins of Alph are mysterious. Ancient ruins where your radio plays strange noises and you encounter the alphabet-like Pokemon called Unknown. The ruins are filled with puzzles, secret rooms, and messages spelled out using the Unknown. In Pokemon Crystal, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, additional Unknown messages provide details about the people who once lived in the ruins of Alph. There are 4 messages. Our words shall remain here for the ages. Thus, we shall erect a Pokemon statue outside. We humans must learn to walk in harmony with them. We depart for their sakes. They possess great insight and refuse the outside world. The wording is slightly different in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but the overall meaning is the same. These messages were left behind by the people who lived in the ruins of Alph. But what do they mean? Did they leave their home because the Unknown dislikes the outside world? How is the statue relevant? What is the correct order to read them in? Perhaps one day we'll learn more about the inhabitants of the ruins of Alph and why they left their homes. Long ago, 2 Pokemon fought a devastating battle that plays a critical role in the story of Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire. KYOGRE, who filled the sea, and GROUDON, who created the land, became rivals and fought for control of the world. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire made a few slight changes to the story to incorporate Mega Evolutions, a gameplay mechanic not included in the older games. The ancient world was filled with natural energy that allowed Groudon and KYOGRE to undergo primal reversion, which greatly increased their power. Not only that, but Primal Groudon and Primal KYOGRE wanted more of the world's energy, which is why they fought each other. Fortunately, the Pokemon Rayquaza was able to calm them, although by the time of the games, primal reversion threatens the Pokemon world once again. If you read the rocks in the sealed chamber of Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald and their remakes, you'll find messages written in Braille. That's right, Braille. Once you translate them, you'll uncover the following legend. In this cave we have lived. We owe all to the Pokemon, but we sealed the Pokemon away. We feared it. Those with courage, those with hope, open a door. An eternal Pokemon awaits. As with the Unknown messages, the remake uses slightly different wording, but the meaning remains. This message allows the player to find Regirock, Regice and Registeel. However, since it refers to a single Pokemon who is featured, it's possible the legend actually refers to Regigigas, who will only appear when you have the other 3 Regis in your party. If that's true, it's a nice bit of foreshadowing. Regigigas wasn't added to the series until a generation later. Well, that was a nice break. Let's go back to Sinnoh and look at another legend found at the Canalave Library. Unlike most of them, this one is fairly long. A young man, callow and foolish in innocence, came to own a sword. With it, he smote Pokemon, which gave sustenance, with carefree abandon. Those not taken as food, he discarded with no afterthought. The following year, no Pokemon appeared. Larders grew bare. The young man seeking the missing Pokemon journeyed afar. Long did he search, and far and wide too, until one he did find. Asked he, "Why do you hide?" To which the Pokemon replied, "If you bear your sword to bring harm upon us, with claws and fangs, we will exact a toll. From your kind, we will take our toll, for it must be done. Done it must be to guard ourselves, and for it, I apologize." To the skies, the young man shouted his dismay. "In having found the sword, I have lost so much. Gorged with power, I grew blind to Pokemon being alive. I will never fall savage again. This sword I denounce and forsake. I plead for forgiveness, for I was but a fool." So saying, the young man hurled the sword to the ground, snapping it. Seeing this, the Pokemon disappeared to a place beyond seeing. This myth stands out for a few reasons. First, it once again refers to humans eating Pokemon. Not only did the young man eat them, but once the Pokemon fled, everyone's larders were bare. It's likely that the toll exacted by the Pokemon to protect themselves was this, the lack of food. Second, this may present an explanation for why people don't fight with weapons in the Pokemon world. The sword blinded the young man to the importance of Pokemon lives, and so he discarded and broke it. Finally, the closing lines are intriguing. The Pokemon who spoke to the man disappeared to a place beyond seeing. Some fans believe this refers to Giratina and the Distortion world. This is supported by the name of the legend, Veilstone's Myth, since Veilstone is close to the Turnback Cave where you can enter the Distortion world. If you thought Pokemon wouldn't delve into theology, you'd be mistaken. At least in Sinnoh, an unending source of Pokemon lore it seems. They have a creation myth. 8 ancient plates tell the story of how the universe was made. When the universe was created, its shards became this plate. The power of defeated giants infuses this plate. 2 beings of time and space set free from the original one. 3 beings were born to bind time and space. 2 make matter and 3 make spirit, shaping the world. The original one breathed alone before the universe came. The powers of plates are shared among Pokemon. The rightful bearer of a plate draws from the plate it holds. The original one is Arceus, the Pokemon who created all the others. From Arceus came Dialga, the Pokemon of time, and Palkia, the Pokemon of space. Now the 3 beings born to bind time and space might refer to Dialga and Palkia along with Giratina, the Pokemon of antimatter. However, it is also possible that this line refers to the late guardians Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. The power of these 3 Pokemon can be used to bind Dialga and Palkia. While Giratina was banished to the Distortion world, Dialga and Palkia went on to create the Pokemon world. Meanwhile, the 3 late guardians gave all living creatures knowledge, emotion, and willpower. Of course, this myth does leave some questions. Who are the defeated giants? And more importantly, how is it okay to catch the creator of the universe in a Pokeball to fight battles for you? It's hard to top the creation of the world, but ultimately, most of these myths have little effect on the games. For our final Pokemon myth, let's look at the myth that forms the core of Pokemon Black and White, the story of the hero of truth and the hero of ideals. Long ago, 2 brothers created the Unova region with the help of a powerful dragon Pokemon. However, these 2 heroes had a disagreement. The older brother thought they should pursue truth, while the second thought they should pursue ideals. In response to their argument, their Pokemon split into 2, Reshiram, who sided with the hero of truth, and Zekrom, who sided with the hero of ideals. They fought, but could not overcome one another. At last, they agreed that there was no right side. However, these events are given new life during Pokemon Black and White. N, who pursues either truth or ideals, depending on which version of the game you play, believes that if he wins the friendship of that ancient Pokemon, people will view him as the new hero. Once recognized as the hero, N will be able to guide people into creating the perfect world he envisions. The player, meanwhile, wins the allegiance of the other legendary Pokemon. The hero of truth once again faces the hero of ideals, with Reshiram and Zekrom by their sides. It's an excellent way to take an ancient myth and make it relevant to the present day story. and that's why I've picked the heroes of truth and ideals as my #1 in-game Pokemon myth. The Pokemon world is filled with so much strange and interesting lore. Who can say what future games will bring? I hope you enjoyed this week's list, and if you did, leave a like. And if you want to see another Pokemon list, click here for my top 10 Pokemon made creepier by Alolan Pokedex entries, or here for my latest list.